Ever wonder what makes really creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how new ideas come to life and become paintings, sculptures, plays, or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community and explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. My next guest is Maggie Hanley. Maggie is the program coordinator of New Mexico Arts by day and a painter by night. And even though I haven't known Maggie as long, or as well as some of my other guests, I decided I needed to talk to her because she's got her foot in so many wheelhouses that I knew she'd have an interesting perspective on the Santa Fe art scene, as well as creativity in general. I wasn't wrong. I'm going to keep this intro to that because her version of everything that we discussed was just so captivating. You'll see. Maggie. I've been looking forward to this so much because you're one of those people that I we've interacted a few times at Strange Bedfellows, which was the event that we did at Ellsworth Gallery. And of course, we interacted when I helped with the New Mexico Arts, grant stuff. But yeah. I mostly know you from Facebook. And I mostly know you from your wonderful support of Santa Fe Arts Club and just all these things that we did during COVID to stay sane. And, and so to be able to sit down with you face to face and finally have a conversation, because there have been so many times when I've thought, God, we have so much to talk about that woman and dance background and so many things that we've shared.
It's true.
And so needless to say, I'm delighted to be here. So there's so many places I want to go. But what I've decided to start asking people is, tell me something that I wouldn't know from reading about your professional resume or what you've done.
Well, this crossed my mind earlier in terms of wondering what you might ask and how did I get formed? When I was a very little girl, my grandfather, Harry Hanley, lorded over the largest collection of Western art east of the Mississippi. It's now housed in the Rockwell Museum. He worked for Bob Rockwell. And at that time, Mr. Rockwell had everything, giant paintings of early American life and Lakota ritual relics and Apache headdresses and Navajo blankets. His whole collection was up on the 4th floor of his department store in Corning, New York, in the furniture department. So I would bop around. I loved my grandfather, and I would go bopping around in there, and I was just submerged in this Native American culture very early, like 3, 4, or 5 years old. And he happened to be the first docent at the Rockwell Museum when they renovated the firehouse in Corning, New York. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wow.
Those early years. And then on my other side of the family, my great-grandmother, her name was May B. Lingenfelder. The B didn't stand for anything, so I'm thinking they kind of had a sense of humor.
Maybe they did.
She was an entrepreneur. She was just a very stoic-looking thing. I have one photograph of her.
Entrepreneur? That's an early time to be an entrepreneur.
That's correct. And she opened up a moccasin factory, and she hired only Seneca women. I'm from upstate New York, in that land of, the Iroquois, Seneca, Onondaga, Cayuga, Keuka. I'm from the Finger Lakes in upstate New York.
Advanced of her.
She was really a powerhouse. Wow. She really was.
And so you obviously then grew up in New York on the East Coast.
Yes. But upstate.
Upstate, sure. Mm-hmm.
I would go into the city once in a while. My stepfather was a 5th generation Jewish clothier. And so we would take little trips sometimes down to New York City to pick out the next season's stuff.
the fabrics and the notions and all of that.
Just everything, clothing and, tie tacks and hats. And he had the kind of clothing store that, everything was unfinished. You went and tried it on and you got the pants hemmed to perfection and the sleeve
He was a haberdasher.
to perfection. And yes, there was an old Italian man on the 4th floor who taught me how to sew. Joe. Yeah. These big steam irons. It was really a trip. Really was a trip.
So did you end up in New York before you were in Santa Fe? Or did you come straight here?
I made a beeline. I was not very engaged in high school, but I was getting A's.
Yeah.
And so I went to my guidance counselor and I said, I got to get out of here. Because in the evenings when all my classmates were, cheerleaders or basketball players or what have you, I was taking extension courses, art courses in 10th and 11th grade for drawing and painting that were given at my high school. So I already had some college credits and I said, let me out of here. So I left after 11th grade and went to the closest community college and started, studio classes, things like that.
And then Santa Fe came on board when?
I went to UNM.
Oh, okay. So
I applied. I got in a really wicked car accident. I put my face through the Volkswagen windshield, and I got a lovely settlement from that and put myself through college.
Wow. And were you...
So I came straight out here because, I was exposed to Georgia O'Keeffe and, the Native American thing was really a tug on me. It's in me.
Yeah, I can totally get that. And did you dance at UNM?
I danced at UNM. I danced with Lauren McDougall and Lee Connor, and that's an interesting story. Lee Connor was, he was a big influence on me. He has passed away since, but interestingly enough, I did circle back to New York after I spent 16 years in Seattle and raised a little family, a couple stepkids, and I got a job as the director of 171 Cedar Art Center, which was a phenomenal orientation and tool, because at Corning Incorporated, of course, they're scouting for people from all over the world to come and work there. So there was an art center there that had a jazz series and a dance series and, kids, adults, musical lessons, dance lessons, ceramics, all kinds of, it was this big job. And ironically, when I was 4 years old, in that very building, that old Victorian, I took ballet when I was a little girl. So that was one of the full circles of my life, to go back there and be the director at that place.
Amazing.
I was like, Grandpa would be proud.
Sure. Are you still dancing?
No, not much. I taught yoga, between 40 and 50 years old, 3 times a week for 10 years. And then I had to relax. So no, I don't do much of that at all.
Well, when music comes on, does your body just automatically move?
Yeah. And I think I brought up the 171 thing because Lee Connor, who was such an influence, because when you get a dance education, it's not just about dancing. It's about so many other things. And
say more about that.
Well, your body is your only medium. That's it. Your body, your emotion, your energy. It's a very interesting thing. And it gives you poise. It makes you conscious of your posture. But funny enough, when I went for the job interview at 171 Cedar Art Center, I had a background in Seattle. I was executive producer for a company that edited film and television commercials, mostly for national broadcast and some film work. And they said, now we're going to ask you a few questions, and we're going to wait. Lois Welk, our artistic director, is going to be here in a few minutes. She's just getting out of a class. And she came in with this spiky red hair and these startling blue eyes. And the only question that she had for me looking at my resume was, did you dance with Lee Connor? And I said, I was flabbergasted. I was sort of at a loss for words, but then I went, oh my God, I've been waiting my whole life to be asked a question like that in a job interview. Thank you. And yes. And she went on to tell me that before he died, his last teaching was there, because he was from a nearby little suburb. And we never knew that about each other when I was at UNM.
Isn't it crazy how those...
Another little circle, you know? It's so very interesting. And in terms of Lauren McDougall, he taught modern dance, and that was my main emphasis, but, you know, you got to take ballet. And I took Graham from Lauren McDougall, who is just, she's a stick of dynamite.
Wow.
And teaching me all that lusciously vicious movement. It was a great time of my life.
So does that movement show up in your paintings?
Yes. Yes, it does.
And when you go, I mean, because we were just looking in your studio at some smaller pieces that then you were asked to do a larger version of.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you found that, you know, you had to call on your dance expertise to do those larger gestural.
And they are gestural, and I try to not contain them, you know. I try to just let the energy rip, and it works. And you also know that I've just done this series of over 20 paintings called The Firmament. And they're about a few different things, but visually you could say that they're about the energy of the weather systems. They're about the climate. They're about storms, skies, clouds. So there's a lot of movement in those. And I will hold the brush and I will move my entire body with the brush against it, just to get spontaneous forms, just to get it going.
Well, I mean, that's what we're witnessing in the skies. And here in Santa Fe, we get good sky.
We do get good sky. There's never any lack of inspiration.
Yeah.
It's true. And the colors are outrageous.
They are. I mean, I have a whole series that I've posted on Instagram that, you know, just sort of a folly of mine called Real Skies of Santa Fe, just because outside my window, I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up.
You have a glorious view of the sunsets at the peak.
Yeah.
Peak. And they're never the same. And sometimes they're soft, like, you know, like a billowy pillow. And other times they're just ravaged gashes and outrageous colors. Just that, you know, unless you were looking at it, you wouldn't believe it. And that was the impetus for me to do this series. They started out they've kind of morphed as I've continued, because I've been doing them about a year and a half, I guess. And it started out as a very abstract forms with sort of absurd colors. And my paint coach, Walt Morton, saw it on Instagram and he said, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." He goes, "The horizon line is just exactly, if it was any higher, if it was any lower, that wouldn't work. And you've got these bizarre colors like butterscotch." And he goes, "You ought to do a lot more of those." Well, I have.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that just like when I take the photographs, even though the colors are spectacular, almost beyond possibility, they're flat because they're photographs. You know, they don't get the expression, that gestural, energetic expression, which
it's true. Or the depth.
Capture, or the depth that you're able to capture in those paintings. And I think it's because you're combining physical gestures with the paint, and so you're kind of it's translating. It's pretty great.
Thank you. Well, I've been doing them on black gessoed canvases. And so how they started out was I would leave some of that as negative space where you might think there would be a gray or a blue or a kind of a lilac. But they are almost graphic the way they started out. But now I'm filling up the canvas. I'm not leaving so much plain black negative space anymore.
So we've covered dance and painting, and we're going to go into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But you've been also involved peripherally to the arts. I mean, you've been involved as an arts administrator, if that's an accurate description.
Yes.
And I know you worked with the Santa Fe Gallery Association.
4 years.
And so how do you do the dance between those two worlds?
Well, that's a good question. And I think about that a lot because, people often say, well, why don't you just paint full time? Well, practically speaking, I'm a single woman and I'm going to retire in the next couple years. And so I like having my pension working for the state of New Mexico. And this is certainly the most formal expression of my doing arts administrative work. It's about service, I think. And plus, because, at the state, I work for New Mexico Arts, which is the state arts agency. And just what we do is we give out the money from the National Endowment of the Arts and the state art money that's in the annual budget. And so I'm very attuned to what it means to be an artist and to need money and to find support and community involvement. And primarily we give money to nonprofit organizations. And so I'm in charge of the major cultural organizations throughout the state, such as the opera, the Santa Fe Opera, world famous, amazing place, all the way down to the little itty bitty guys. And the budgets range from, zero to a few $1 million. So what I mostly find myself doing is giving a lot of technical help to small nonprofits. Some of them are out in the middle of nowhere and they are performing miracles with nothing.
I have to say that just parenthetically that the work that I did to help you guys when I was reading the grants that one year.
Yeah.
I was so moved by the miracles
it is
that were
moving.
Produced on no budget. And part of what the process is not only was I reading through, the paperwork and the spreadsheets, but I got to review excerpts from the performances.
Correct. And the artistic samples.
It was that blew my
Isn't
mind.
it something?
It was really moving.
And then to furthermore think that they're all volunteers. They're just doing this for the love of, and so, a lot of retirees are heading the cause. I'm sure even just forming a nonprofit is hard work. It's really hard work.
I'm learning.
Hats off to them at the very first. Yeah, I bet you are. I bet you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is hats off. It's hats off to all of us who have been able to, convert a passion into something that is really, as you said at the beginning of this, really about building community and helping.
It really is. And, we kind of trade places back and forth with Mississippi as one of the poorest states in the nation. And in terms of our population, there are way less people here than there is land. And so to get those artistic experiences and the cultural events to these rural areas, the outreach we do is extremely important. And so I dedicate myself to that. Last year, I was charged with bringing and working with the Mid-America Arts Alliance, and they had partnered up with an organization called Artist Inc. Fascinating. And, everybody's still doing Zoom calls, so it was really perfect. But the hardest part of the job was getting the word out and getting people to sign up for these 3-day Zoom meetings with these amazing artistic facilitators. We did one of them that was Native American focused, because that's important to me. And so, that's the work involved there is going and looking at all their community calendars, finding out what dates wouldn't conflict with festivals and dances and so on and it's very getting those inroads to the Native American communities is not easy. If you go to any of the 14 Pueblos websites, there's no phone numbers, there's no email addresses, so it took a lot of work. And then,
so how did you ultimately do that?
Oh my God.
Creating personal liaisons within each of the Pueblos? Or
that and a million other things. Hitting on my friends who I know and saying, let me hit on your friends, and building networks, going to their websites, actual physical addresses, did a mailing, went to the major Native American cultural centers, made connections there, got them to help me do this, because once we were in COVID, I couldn't take around my, I not only coach the nonprofits, I do one-on-one coaching with artists in an economic development kind of lens. And so I authored a program called Artist to Artist, When Art Is Your Business. And I've taken it to Gallup. I took it to Taos. Those couldn't have been two more extremely different experiences. Yeah.
And can you say a little bit more about how they were different? I mean,
yes,
because,
I can.
For those of us who live in Santa Fe, I'm a newcomer relative, but it's a mystery to me how many subtleties and facets there are to Native life. And so,
it's true.
A good example will be
a good example would be when I took it to Gallup. And, of course, there's a PowerPoint presentation, but, I'm not really that girl. But I worked there's a lot of satellites via UNM, and they're small business development centers. And so I worked in companionship with them and their local arts council, because, yes, I have a giant list of nonprofits, nonprofit arts organizations throughout the state, but I don't have a big database of artists. Like, how do I get a hold of these people? So I figured out to do it that way. And the small business development centers, nobody knows about them. So when I did it in Gallup, they put me in a room, Chamber of Commerce, and all I really needed was tables, chairs, and a coffee setup, maybe, and some water. And so we get into this place, and there's a big proscenium, and then they've got the chairs and the tables all facing like a classroom. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be on a stage. This, Wasichu up here on the stage going click, click, click and reading aloud. No. So they helped me rearrange the tables in a circle, and I sat down with them. And when people filed in, I'd say it was about 50% Navajo, 25% Hopi, and 25% Zuni. And they were there to absorb thoughts, whatever they could get. So it was pretty squirrely. I mean, I decided to do it. Let's start with question and answers. What do you want to know? Why are you here? What are you good at? What are you not good at? And I watched all 35, 40 strangers. Nobody knew anybody. And I'm like, but this is Gallup. But they did. They came in from all over the place. So I watched this group of people network. It was a miracle. I always refer to it as the best day of my life, because one woman would say, I'm terrible at marketing myself, but I can take a really beautiful photograph of products. And somebody else was like, oh, well, I'm really good at this, but I'm not very good at that. And I watched them all just kind of march towards each other. And I am telling you, I said, we could talk about anything you want to talk about. Pricing was a big one, particularly for Native Americans, because, my God, an example, some of the jewelers, they can work on a piece for 9 months and, work on a lot of other things for 9-10 months and make their entire annual income at Indian market. Mm. And so one of the things that came up a lot was pricing, because I think a lot of, I'm just going to say it, gringos like to kick tires.
Yeah.
And so we talked about the psychology of that and about how that works on them, and just the fear of missing out on a sale and being, manipulated about price. So I actually put out language like, okay, you were for 7 months on that and you would like to get $7,000 for that. So if somebody comes up to you and says, so is $7,000 your best price? I want you to immediately respond and say, no, thank you for asking. $10,000 is my best price. Flip it.
Yeah.
So, talking about that, and some of the letters I got afterwards. I mean, this one guy was fresh out of prison, dressed up in a suit there, just it just kind of chokes me up. But he wrote me a letter to say that it was life-changing for him. And that's why I stick with the arts administration thing.
I totally get it.
It really matters.
And just for our listeners, because you just described something that is so profound. I mean, it's hard to top it, but like just for contrast, what was Taos like? You said Gallup and Taos.
Oh, contrast. I go to and everybody's got their arms crossed and their legs crossed. And when I said, well, what are you here to learn? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to know? Nothing. Not one Native American in the room. And as opposed to, I'm just going to say it, as opposed to the two women who helped me so beautifully market the program in Gallup, I worked with two men in Taos. And I said, well, the only thing I need is like a Wi-Fi connection, tables and chairs, some electricity, coffee if you got it. And they put me in a room with no Wi-Fi. So it was kind of a cluster at the front end, a little technology panic. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of communion.
Yeah, different energy. Well, Taos has kind of got its own energy.
Yes, it does.
Anyway, sort of the Wild West of Santa Fe.
Well, sort of. But there's also a sophistication there that is... the way I felt about it, maybe this isn't true, but this was the impression that I got, was nobody wanted to say that they didn't know how to do something.
Oh, okay.
Nobody wanted to put it out there. Nobody really wanted to start this. So that one was kind of dry.
They weren't willing to be vulnerable in any way.
Not at all.
I wonder why that is. Well, of course, Taos is a little bit more of an art capital, maybe. And,
yes.
It's the Mabel Dodge and Agnes Martin and all kinds of, people who are, it's got a huge art tradition, a huge historical art tradition.
That's exactly right. So that when I took it to Las Cruces, that was interesting. Because that was an interesting mix of people in the room, too. And I think that there was a real, how could I put this? They felt as if their art wasn't being received very well. Nobody wanted to really pay anything for it. I think they felt disrespected as artists, or at least the people that attended. And I said, well, listen, it all started in Taos. And then it moved to Santa Fe as this amazing world capital of art sales. And now Albuquerque is shining. You're next, Las Cruces. Are you going to be ready? So they got all charged up. That was
a brilliant strategy.
Well, top of the hat.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because one of the things I've been thinking about with this series is that certainly I want to start in Santa Fe because this is hometown.
It's a mecca.
But I was talking to somebody the other day and we decided that Santa Fe is more than just a location and a destination. It's sort of a state of mind. And it's that state of mind and that crossroads of cultures and art, and it's a crossroads between the East Coast and the West Coast. It's sort of an epicenter of a lot of things, and it somehow is a vortex. It just draws people in. What do you think it is about Santa Fe?
Well, I think it draws people in, and if you're not a good fit, it'll spit you right out. I know everybody's heard that.
Yeah.
And I knew when I came back here that it would be a better place for me to start over. I think that the other way I look at Santa Fe is I used to call it the town of broken women. Because a lot of women, they've raised their children, they've gone off to college, they're grown-ups, they get divorced, they don't know who they are, they've been serving their family forever, and they come here, and I almost can spot them. That they're going to color their hair and they're going to wear the clothes they want to wear and they're going to go to things, travel bug and hear some talk about Indonesia or, just doing eccentric things because there is plenty of that available here. But I also think that the historic reputation of the Taos Santa Fe thing is very, very special, and it's always drawn artists. Not necessarily that they stay here, but they come they get influenced, they create, and then take that home.
And speaking of women, some very powerful women artists. I mean, some of the most acclaimed women
That's exactly
artists.
right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So you think Georgia O'Keeffe and Millicent Rogers. And Mabel Dodge all sort of were like the precursors to that?
Yes, I do. And they were human.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever do any reading up on them, there were fights. It's like, maybe you could not sleep with my husband. So Georgia O'Keeffe and Mabel kind of got into it. But there is a romanticism that once you break through the romanticism, those really amazing human stories are there. And just much like the movie that just came out, Oppenheimer, that's a part of this region as well. And there's really every different kind of person you could think of come in here. And I bet you do too, I like living in a majority city, state. It pleases me to hear different languages behind me in the grocery store. I prefer it.
Yeah, it's certainly of all the places that I lived in the United States, it reminds me the most of a European experience in the sense that, it's got that village quality to it, even though it's a pretty sizable town.
And with all our international visitors, too. I mean, you can hear every different language walking around the plaza. It's pretty amazing. I like it. And we like our music, and we like our art festivals, and we love our museums.
Yeah.
I mean, for this size of a town, to have so many museums within 7 miles of each other, amazing. And now we have a new one.
Have you been?
The Vladimir. I've been inside, yes. And we got the tour on the front end and the tour on the back end. That's one of the perks of working for the state.
Sure. Mm-hmm. And there's a new Georgia O'Keeffe museum, or a new wing of the museum opening up that I understand. I don't know much about that, but that's in the rumor mill. Yeah, so we aren't stagnant. We continue to grow, and with places like Peter's project and Site, and it stays contemporary. We aren't just steeped. It's not Santa Fe style around here anymore. You aren't bludgeoned with skulls and coyotes and wood snakes painted with stripes. It's mature, it's sophisticated, and it's... And when you were with the Gallery Association, did you help foster, that contemporary?
Well, mostly I was running around asking people for $500 for their membership fee. But so, the assumption is because I'm an artist, I know all the other artists, I'm getting there. But what I ended up doing was getting to know all the gallery owners. And that was a very interesting job because gallery owners, the egos were incredibly diverse. And I can handle people. So when I first got there, I thought, why is this association with 200 galleries within a 2-mile radius only have 64 members? What's up with that? So I went to visit... it was recommended to me to go visit John Schaffer at Peyton Wright Gallery, and his work, for your listeners, is mostly dealing with estate work, a real focus on modern art, not necessarily contemporary art. But, so they sent me over to chat with him, and we talked for a long time, and I said, well, what is this? Why are there so few members? And he said, well, just do your best. Go out there and come back to me when you get to 90. Well, I didn't go back to him until I got 110. Because that's me.
Yeah.
Can do. He was flabbergasted.
And all the while you're doing painting.
Yeah.
As you're doing this. Yeah, I mean, I think that... I don't know if Summers was coined this phrase or I came up with it on my own, but he was talking about the last dinner that you guys organized and being about sort of compulsive creatives.
Can't help it.
And you are definitely in that category, as well as being an unsung hero of the art administration side of things, but just the compulsive creative part of it. Talk to me about
Best
that.
of both worlds. Well, about the creating, I've always done watercolors, and when I was in Seattle, I just amaze myself sometimes to think back to myself as a 22-year-old and marching into a gallery and saying, I'd like to have a one-girl show in here. And I'm going, okay. And then having it happen every year. And I was doing watercolors at that time. I studied watercolor with Sam Smith at UNM, and he was a big name over at Tamarind Institute. I was dropping some names here. And so I was a watercolor artist. That was it. And for 10 years, I was also a floral designer and high-end stuff like Bill Gates' dad's law firm, all 4 floors, big sculptural stuff, right? So on the weekends, I'd take the flowers that weren't going to last till Monday, I'd take them home and I'd paint. So I kind of got this reputation as flower girl. And then I really, after just sort of rendering, I wanted to come up with some ideas about what I wanted to paint in terms of what I wanted to say. I mean, the flowers were lovely and decorative. But I don't know, there were a lot of great artists in Seattle at that time too. So I wanted to expand things a bit. So I painted watercolors up until 2016, September of 2016, where I had been corresponding and talking and flirting and with an artist who was out of LA. He was an artist, an author. I would describe him as a very witty autodidact, just a trip. And, after 1,700 emails, 700 backwall messages, we were just like devouring each other's brains. So I made a decision. I said, I'm going to come down there and meet you. I read your 2 books now. I know there's a 3rd, but I'd like to meet you. And so he picked me up, went up to the Getty. I know he was assessing what my tastes were. Went out to dinner, and then he took me to his studio, opens the door, and turns around and goes, you leave your watercolor sensibilities right out here. I went, okay. We walk in. It was easel, palette, thousands of dollars worth of brushes and pigments. And he says, I'm going to teach you how to paint oils. I said, okay.
Did that feel condescending or exciting?
Exciting. I understand where that question is coming from, but I never got to the place with Walt Morton where it felt condescending. I just ate it up because I had this.
So what you're describing is your first encounter with Walt Morton.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And now that I know a little bit about him through your sharing on Facebook, that makes I'm connecting the dots. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he gets a hold of me sometimes before he publishes these screeds that are very challenging. They're very in your face.
I love them.
He used to teach at U.S. University of Davis in Southern California, film. He was an ad man for a very long time. I think his day rate when he quit that was like $3,000 a day. His first art teacher, because he grew up in Pennsylvania, was Andrew Wyeth. Perfect. But he didn't want to draw the dead pine cone.
Right.
So that's the kind of guy he was. He's worked with Steve Jobs. He's really an amazing brain. I've never really asked him what his IQ was, but I'm sure it's right up there. So anyway, that changed everything. And after the 4th day, I painted my own painting and posted it on Facebook. And people went crazy. They lost their minds. It was a purple cow. I wish I still owned it. But somebody said...
Well, it's got to be... I'm so curious about that because when I've dabbled in enough things just to know not to do it anymore, but the sensation of watercolor and the sensation of oil, 2 completely different physical sensations. That's got to be a wildly different way of approaching canvas.
It was a reversal. To draw for a watercolor, or the way I drew to do a watercolor, if I was rendering something and not being abstract or conceptual, you draw to keep the white.
because you don't use white paint in watercolor, or
It's
some
the
people
negative
do,
space
but
coming
it's
through,
it's
right? Yeah.
murky.
Yeah.
I find it muddy. But so it's completely different. So just, mixing the linseed oil or what have you and getting it to the right consistency. Oh, that's too much linseed oil. Oh, that's not enough. So basically, he trained me in a way that I don't know what else to call it, but I ended up calling it emergent. So what you did was you just big, gobs of paint, and you just start slapping it on. No plan, no drawing, nothing like that. You just start slapping it on, wiping it off, making marks, turning the canvas, seeing what you see, turn it again, see what you see. I don't see anything. So, take another color, slap, 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 wipe, mark, mark. What do you see? Nothing. Turn it. Oh, I see something. And then you pull it out.
Wow.
And that was like unclipping my wings. Because with the watercolor, I could never really quite figure out how to get it to be more than just a rendering. Do you know?
Yeah, totally.
What I mean?
Totally. Well, and so this freedom, this sort of breaking through of something almost unconscious coming through.
Yeah. And the opacity.
That's a whole different way of. It's not an intellectual process anymore. It's something much more visceral and much more emotional.
That's exactly right.
So say more about that.
And surprising. Well, it's always it's the greatest conversation I've ever had. Let's just say that.
With yourself?
With
painting?
The painting, with what's going on. It's like, okay, what do you do next? What do you see? Oh, God, I kind of see this or that. I see a figure. What's the figure doing? What do you absolutely need to keep and do not touch? Because that is almost the defining moment of what you're trying to articulate here, And so there's a lot more looking than there is brush time.
So you're listening to the canvas. It's basically telling you what to do.
It's conversation. Yep. And the piece that you referred to in the bedroom of the closet, called War Robe. I'll tell you about that process. I had this idea about a closet. I didn't do a drawing, but I had this idea about light hitting a closet in the middle. And actually, it was a photograph that I took. But I didn't do a drawing on the canvas. What I did was I drew some lines, some verticals, and some horizontals. And I just got going on it. I didn't hesitate. I mixed up maybe 5 colors and plenty of it and just started slapping it on and followed the lines a bit, the horizontals and the verticals, until these hanging clothing started to come into view. And then I looked at the colors very roughly and knew that in the center where I wanted the light, the sunlight that was hitting the closet at that time, I was so into it, I drooled.
Awesome. So great.
I was like, oh my God, I drooled. I'm in the flow. I was gone. And that is the beauty of painting. And why I'll never stop, because to lose time like that is a great, great gift. I remember, you were talking about the 2 pieces that you saw of mine at the Webster collection. In the place where I used to live, I would paint until it was quite late at night, and there were hardly any working electric sockets, let alone lighting. So I would end up painting late into the night, and sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and go, oh. But I did wake up this one morning, and I had been working on 2 pieces at the same time, which is handy because all the colors are there on the palette, right? And I'm going and try to making them relate to one another, but they're quite abstract. We should probably talk about that, abstract expressionism. Don't let me forget. But when I woke up in the morning and I went out to see them, I cried because I thought they were so beautiful. And that was an interesting moment for me because I can be my own worst critic.
Yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable statement. And most of the artists I know are their worst critics. So it's just really powerful to hear you say that.
It was really something. And, the other story that I should probably tell you is that my mother, her maiden name is, her name was Maureen Hartigan. And I don't know if you've heard of the abstract expressionist, Grace Hartigan in the New York School.
Yeah.
It's my mother's cousin.
Wow.
I didn't know this. She didn't tell me this until I was 28 years old or so. I was like, geez, Mom.
Why do you think
Don't you think I might have wanted to know that? Because really, when I was in the car accident, and I had some money and decided to put myself through school, they really would have liked to have seen me have a backup plan. You should take some business courses. I was like, no way. I want to be in a pink collar wardrobe. No, that's not what I'm doing. So I had the freedom to pick the curriculum because I was paying my own way. So
what do you think possessed your mom not to share that with you? They just sort of wanted to protect you, maybe.
I don't know. Well, that would be I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
Well, I mean, I say that because from my own experience, I wanted to be a dancer, and that was a no-go with my family.
So absolutely. You can relate.
Totally relate. I mean, they after I realized I probably was saved when I saw some of my friends who did pursue it, and cigarettes and their feet problems and all struggle.
It's interesting because my roommate throughout college, Audrey Durrell, a beautiful, lovely woman, I remember seeing her in the ballet class and going, oh my God, that's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And she just moved like a fawn. And it turned, she had been doing ballet since she was a child in Belgium. And she was very sophisticated and European. I was quite taken with her. And we became fast friends and roomed in a couple different houses together. And it's interesting because when I took off to Seattle, because nothing was going on in Albuquerque when I was finished with college, I made a beeline for Seattle. Good move. And I pursued the art, and she pursued the dance. But I met her in watercolor class with Sam Smith. So we were both dancing watercolorists. And the two people, and all, 10,000 students. But we found each other, and she went on to teach many of the young, mostly girls, dance. She had a dance studio here in Santa Fe for many, many years.
Oh, so she didn't go to Seattle with you? She stayed here. Okay,
no, she stayed here
in New Mexico.
And married Jeffrey Gorman, who you may know, a great sculptural artist. And so now she's a photographer, doing a lot of work with Trend magazine.
Is she still dancing?
And Cynthia Canyon. No.
Wow.
No. Yeah. She got a new profession and sold her business.
Well, we while we were talking before, you said, don't let me forget to talk about abstract expressionism. Was that the reference to your aunt?
Grace Hartigan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was mind-blowing. And, that was before the internet,
So did you then go ahead and
I went
research
to the
her?
Seattle library and got everything I could possibly find on her. And the only personal story my mother told was, it was kind of a scandal. She had a couple kids and a husband in New Jersey, and she just left and went to go freeze in a loft and, hanging out with Lee Krasner. I mean, I have pictures of her laughing her head off with, that whole crew. She was hanging with the big boys.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is her work shown anywhere?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, they toured a show, Women of Abstract Expressionism, and it made its way to Denver, and I went up and was able to stand in the middle of a room surrounded by her giant, amazing paintings. That was another best moment in my life. It's like I could feel her. And with Walt having this little piece of information on me, he pushes me in that direction.
Yeah, she's not still alive?
Oh, no. She passed away. I never did get to meet her. She taught at the Chicago Art Institute for a while, and she's got pieces in all the major museums. She did very well for herself.
Wow. So do you think it's she who's speaking with you through the canvases?
I don't know, but I do give her a nod of appreciation every now and then. You know, just to say, between that and my childhood and I am a product of my ancestors.
Well,
and my mother was a social worker, so that's sort of the service aspect in the arts, you know.
Well, I think it's a sort of a beautiful full circle, because you've obviously been very taken by Native American, and to say, you know, to sort of acknowledge the generations before you, which leads me to wonder, you mentioned stepchildren. Are any of them creatives?
No.
Was that something that kind of just was never on the radar? Or
No, not really. But I've given lessons. I did when I was back in upstate New York from... Gosh, when did I go back there? 1998 to 2009. I volunteered, taught at the school for their art club. And there's a couple kids in there that have gone on to great things. Megan Farmer is now a photojournalist in Seattle. Because Seattle, they loved my stories. I was there at a very interesting time.
Well, so that's great. So you do feel like there's a pay it forward element. Of course, you're paying it forward in all the things that you do for the community, but I just meant specifically that artistic thread that...
Well, another thing that I did was I came up with a program, because it's very hard to earn money up there in that little rural area. I came up with a program that I took around to the school districts called Yoga and Art. And I did it from third graders all the way up to sophomores, I think. And I would put them on the ground, lay down. And they'd be like, what? Because they'd come in, zzz, you know, just vibrating. Put them on the ground. And I'd take them down, you know, through a guided meditation, take them down to the alpha level. And then I would talk them back up. And it would always be so interesting because they're all laying around on the floor. And when I'd, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, open your eyes, you could see their breath coming back into their bodies, their consciousness coming back into their bodies. So they'd be very calm. And so then we would do a few of the animal poses, usually, not very many, 4 or 5. And I would tell them, you can either draw your friend or whoever, or you can draw yourself. And I would give them big, thick paper and Sharpies. None of this pencils and eraser stuff. Commit to that line. And oh my gosh, that was rewarding. And I did some watercolor workshops at the local library and things like that. And then I started with 3 other people, started an event that's going on to this day that was a fundraiser for art scholarships for the high school. It's called the Palace of Keuka, because Keuka is a beautiful, beautiful lake. I don't know if you've been up there. But we did a road rally type of thing where we hit up businesses all the way around the lake and got them to sponsor a palette. And at the auction, I'm, a little militant about this, that no, don't ask artists to donate things to, don't ask some of the poorest of our population to finance, your fundraiser by asking them for free art. I said, here's how this is going to go. We'll have the road rally. We'll have a little feature on each of the pallets, giant 6-foot pallets. And then we had the local Mercury aircraft machined, fabricated big, heavy easels. So they were all displayed outdoors at a business, with little clues on the back for the kids so they can do the road rally aspect. And there was an auction at the end of the year, and 50% of the money went to the artist. And 50%, and it's grown and grown and grown and grown. A few years back, they sent me the 10th anniversary edition.
That is so cool.
Of palettes. Yeah, it was really cool. Have you ever thought
about trying something like that here in New Mexico?
I'm too busy.
You're too busy.
I'm too busy.
There's so many ideas. I mean, I have to say, one of the reasons I am doing this whole series and the nonprofit organization in general is that I really feel like we're at a time in our world where creativity needs to be unleashed, like big time. And
There's
if
no
the
doubt.
most creative among us can't, help massage new ideas and get people thinking outside the box, then where are we? And we have this huge resource of all these very, very creative minds, but they tend to be a little bit isolated from the general population. So
That's right.
this building of bridges, which is why my organization is called Art Bridge, to kind of create more of a flow back and forth between the civilian population and all the
Right.
concerns that we all have. I consider myself part of that population also. And the creatives who are, I also feel like I've got one leg in that part of the world, and trying to bring those conversations together.
And that's not an easy thing to do, to get artists out of isolation. Which is why.
Or civilians out of isolation. It's just as daunting for them.
Well, or, the other thing that you can see in Santa Fe is that the citizens, they come and they observe. They're onlookers, they're voyeurs. Bring them in. That's why, in terms of artists isolating, that's why Summers and I started this Artists in Conversation dinner party. And you would be shocked at how many of these people, 10 at a time, don't know each other. And it just blows my mind.
It is crazy. And it's kind of what, Summers and I talked about doing that, before COVID happened.
Yeah,
and of course, things went another way.
Right.
And I was so thrilled to hear that you two had gotten started on it, because certainly Santa Fe Arts Club was hopefully going to have that as an outcome, some way for the people who had met in isolation to come together, and break bread.
Yes.
And the fact that you guys are doing it is just...
We just talk each other's faces off, and you just wouldn't believe it. The first one was... they've all been really unique and really fun. And, it's been a great way for me, because as I said, I could name 100 gallery owners, and I could name 100 nonprofit organizations. I don't think I could have named 100 artists, but I can now.
Oh, that's great.
So it's really expanding.
That's great. Well, I'm hoping, Santa Fe Arts Club might be giving some other artists visibility to each other within the community.
I think so.
I hope. And
yes, I've met people there and gleaned some friendships from there. Facebook has been epic in terms of me getting to know the artists in this town.
Right? I mean,
it's by sharing your art, by sharing your opinions and praise, typically, of other people's art. It's I have made some really dear and close friendships.
And isn't that nice? Because it's typically,
Lovely.
we all complain and rant and rave about technology and what how it's so isolating. But in this case, it's one of those things that really does bring us together.
Yes, exactly. I don't always agree with that isolation stuff.
Yeah.
But, with our practice and needing it to be quiet, and, I come home on Friday nights and I put on my paint clothes, and I don't go out to bars. I mean, I may go out to dinner with friends once in a while, but Sunday night I take my paint clothes off and go back to the grind.
Yeah.
And then
there's
during the
an
week.
inhale and exhale element to it.
Exactly.
Obviously.
Well, one of the things that you were talking about asking artists questions about was blocks, artistic blocks. How do you deal with that? I don't have to deal with it. I'm really kind of lucky that way, because there's a balance of being out in the world and, helping other organizations, other people, other artists. And then my solitude here with the painting. It's a really nice balance, so I don't burn myself out. I often wonder, what if you didn't go somewhere else 40 hours a week? What would that look like? I don't know.
And then other artists do things to deliberately jumpstart them into another mindset.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've gone through phases. I guess this last winter I wasn't very productive. I kind of took some emotional knocks and was, frankly depressed. And I didn't feel like painting. I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the vision. I didn't have the spark. And a lot of people would have ridden themselves like a pony over that. But I didn't. I just thought, Maggie, you're recharging.
Well, good for you, because a lot of people also, and I certainly see a lot of evidence of this, is, people take their artwork into that dark place with them. And sometimes it's really interesting and sometimes it's just really dark.
Right. Well, I have some dark work myself.
Well, and not to say that there's anything necessarily
I don't think
wrong,
they're going to fly off the wall.
Right.
And I don't expect that,
Well, sometimes it's just part of the working through it. But I think
I think so too.
Makes me think of another point, which is not everything that any artist does is great. I mean, I think there are a lot of people, like Picasso is very prolific and, not all of his work is great. I mean, because somebody says it's a Picasso, we think we're supposed to genuflect in front of it.
Every single one is brilliant. No, when I've taken on a few students, 2 or 3, no, maybe 4 at this point, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because I'm saying not everything you're going to do is precious. So just do it, toss it over your shoulder, do it again, toss it over your shoulder. By about number 6 or number 12, then you'll have something.
Yeah.
Then you'll have something, but this is not precious.
Yeah.
And, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're going to agonize over making every single thing that you start a success, because that's unrealistic.
Well, I think it's also really helpful for civilians, not artists, to hear that, because I think one of the most intimidating things that there has to be is bridging that gap between being, somebody who considers themselves non-creative and creative. It's like staring down that blank canvas and having the courage to start something, and then it's not very good, and then they just they don't know where to go from there.
And a lot of people end it right there.
A lot of people do. So what happens when you hit a canvas? Then it's just kind of like, no.
I toss it.
You toss it. You start from scratch.
I bury it, and I go on to the next.
Yeah.
And when I first started after 2016 and 2017, I did a lot of shitty paintings, but it's okay, because then once they dried, I paint over them. So if any of these final products, with 3 and 4 paintings, I think about the future. And how they can sometimes see through the technology and go, oh, there's a different thing under here. They're going to have a blast with me, because some of them, there's the evolution of, and that was the beauty of moving from watercolor to oils, is that I could wreck it and then I could fix it. Because with watercolor, there's no fixing it. Yeah. A color laid is a color played, and there's no going any lighter. There's no pulling it back, But
so I want to change gears for just a second, because you participated in the Strange Bedfellows.
Yes.
Whatever we would call it, performance art piece.
Yes.
And so that was another completely different departure. I mean, so here you are, a painter, you're a dancer. The performance you did had no bearing on either of those things.
That's right.
Tell me how that evolved.
The inspiration for Strange Bedfellows, as I understand it, was the bed-in.
Sure.
With John Lennon. But anyway, so that was the inspiration. And then it was the bed, and then I was thinking performance art, and I do write quite a bit, but boy, it came to me in one solid moment, because I do like poetry, as you know. I post poetry and images all the time, and I write a very little bit of poetry, but in that moment, I thought, well, I should do something. And then, a couple hours later, I went, oh, I know what I could do. Because I started, and it was the song Imagine. And right around that time, when that came out, I had my cousin Michael went to be in the Vietnam War. And there was a lot of shame around when he came back as a heroin addict. Not a lot of understanding or compassion. He took his own life, just to make that long story short. And there was so much music written, amazing poetry put to music, written during those days, that I collected like 12 of them and honed it down to about, I think, 5. And we started with our friend Somers Randolph, who we keep referring to, with his big 6'5" booming voice. I wanted him to read Howl by Allen Ginsberg. So that's how the piece started. And then the songs just came. They were just Tin Soldier, Imagine, I forget some of the others. I have it in a folder in the other room, but I won't jump up and get it. And I had Anna read some of it, and we did a little bit of a movement performance piece with Somers as the soldier, and I got a lot of flowers. And I called the piece Sleeping in a Bed That You Didn't Make, Not of Your Own Making, something like that. And that was about the soldier experience. Because, at New Mexico Arts, we do a lot of work with the arts and the military. And I was sort of in the middle of that at that time, too. So...
Well, and it was so moving because here we have a bed and it's sort of in the window, and Summers, who, as you've just described, is this enormous man who's lying basically in a corpse position, and you and the other woman who were reading poetry were laying these flowers on him. It was so powerful. You have as your as a closing comment on your emails, art saves lives. That moves me, deeply.
It does.
And so just say a little something about how art saves lives.
Oh, well, it's saved mine. It has definitely saved mine. And I know for many, just in the immediate area, I know that many of the nonprofits offer a hand, a way, a purpose, a cause, as they invite children into some type of discipline or another. For some kids, it's sports, but I know it saves lives. And I'm just going to go for it. This is probably going to think I'm sort of whacked, but there's a lot of mental illness involved in the arts and with artists, and I'm no exception. And I know I'm in good company. There's a book called Touched by Fire, and it goes throughout history and documents all the artists who have taken their own lives, who have suffered through bipolar, whether that was legitimate or even known as an affliction, if you will. But I think that the life-saving aspect of the arts is, one, losing yourself, like I mentioned before, losing time, taking the focus off yourself and putting it into something else. The feeling of acceptance in the community when you get feedback. Being part of a bigger group. All of these things. Being able to express yourself. Being able to express the inexpressible is a life-saving activity. And art saves lives.
Excellent. So it's part of my core mission is to really underscore the importance of art. And when I saw that you had written on your emails at the bottom, art saves lives, I just knew that had to get in here somewhere.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
My pleasure. This is delightful.
Thank you so much.
I could do it for another hour.
Me
This
too.
is great.
And I'll probably have to come back.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are things
You're
that
most
I've
welcome.
missed.
Yeah.
But okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on ArtStorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.